Welcome to the Elokus podcast, and this is class number 2 in the 6th discourse, in the Great Discourse, B'Shasha Ekdimu 5672. And this is the second discourse in the Maimer Kol Machlokes, which is the Shabbos Korach Maimer. And we began yesterday, and we continue today, and this is class number 2 in this discourse, but also class number 2 in chapter 21 of the chapters of this great book. Okay, so yesterday we left off with a good question, a question that we learned after we presented some of my questions on the Mishnah. It talks about the different types of arguments and disputes, but then we began taking it back to the question regarding the 10 hidden spheros, the 10 spheros hagnuzos. And over there, we discussed, the question was, how can it be that the 10 spheros are pashut? That was the big question. How can we say they're simple? How can these lights be considered simple if they are 10? If they are 10, means that they have to have some kind of an hagdar, as we call it. They have to have some kind of differentiation that separates one from the other. Why it's called 10. If it's 10, then it has, this is number 1, this is number 2, and 2 is different than 1, because if 2 is 1, then why is it something else? It's the same idea, it's the same light. So the fact that it's 10 means they're different. And if they're different, how can we say they're pashut? Pashut means they have no boundaries, and they're simple. It seems it's an inherent contradiction. So to answer that, he begins over here. Let's take a look and see if we can figure this out. This is very deep, and let's see how Hashem's help it'll clarify to myself too as I'm teaching it, because I'm also still struggling with what he's saying. But let's make an attempt. Here we go. This is the 4th line in the copy that I'm using over here is as I mentioned many times, the 3-volume book of B'Shasha Ekdimu, the blue set. This is on page Lamed Daled, the 4th line. Acha inyan hu, the idea is as follows. The inyan is bar le'el, we already explained, Perek Zayin, in chapter 16. The asa spheres hagnuzos, that these 10 hidden spheres, yois, even though the shem shayrish makar hagvul, even though they are the root and the source of where limitation starts, because prior to the 10 hidden spheres, you do have Or Ein Sof, but Or Ein Sof obviously is Ein Sof. Ein Sof means without an end. And therefore there isn't yet any beginning of a gvul, of a limitation. And even though there are spheros already in the Or Ein Sof, but remember we discussed that the level of sphera in the Or Ein Sof itself, remember we spoke the higher level of the Or Ein Sof, is a beligavul spheros without an end possibilities. The spheros, and every sphere is utterly pashut. Pashut meaning with the complete, without any design whatsoever. And that is the state of spheres ein kates, that's the Or. And obviously in the source of the light, in the Ma'or, in the luminary itself, in Atzmos, in the essence of God itself, obviously over there's no limitation. So where does the beginning of limitations begin? Well, it starts that the light that Hashem already is thinking of 10 spheres. There's already the revelation is the second level of the light as it's considering that this is light. Remember, this is still a light that is still within the source. We're talking before the tzimtzum, before the contraction. There's no existence of worlds yet. There's no vessels. There's no containers. There's nothing. There's pure infinite light. But the infinite light is thinking already about a world. And as a result of that, it's thinking already that this world is going to be developed with a system of 10 powers. And the 10 powers is going to make up the entire structure of that world. So just by the thought of the 10 powers, which is already, to some degree, we're going to talk about in a moment, imprinting itself already into the light. So that's the beginning of Gvul. That's where limitation starts. That's the first notion of limitation. Okay? So that's what he's saying over here. Even though Imayosh and Shirish, they are the root. It's not yet Gavul, as we're going to see soon. The light isn't tainted in any way. As we're going to see in a moment, he's going to gate any tainting of the light, because then it wouldn't be pashut. Remember, we're going to hold on very firmly to the idea that the light is pashut. Pashut means simple, without definition. And if that's the case, it's purely infinite. But yet, since it is Esa Spheres Agnuzais, in somehow what, where, and when, we're going to find some subtle 10 over here. Somehow the 10 spherot are going to creep into this simple light. So in that sense, it's a shirish, and it's a root, umakar, and it's the source, the root and the source of gevul, of limitation. However, we discussed earlier in chapter 16, Ein ze b'chinas koyach hagvul shebe'ein sof. This is not the power, the limiting power of the Or Ein Sof. So if you remember, because the koyach hagvul that the Or Ein Sof has, that's the source of the kalim, of the vessels. Remember, there are oiros and there are kalim, there are lights and vessels. Vessels is limitation. Now, even in the Or Ein Sof that's before the tzimtzum, the vessels in the literal sense are only going to start after the tzimtzum. And remember, we learned that's the whole reason the main primary reason for the tzimtzum was for the contraction. Tzimtzum means the contraction was to make space and bring out the possibility of to be megala, the shorish HaKelim, the root of Kelim. Because the Kelim can only exist when there is a tzimtzum on a removal of the Or Ein Sof. Because Kelim are already limitation. Vessels are already limitation. And we said that the main point of the tzimtzum was to make space of the kalim. If you remember, just to bring everybody back, we discussed that there was something called Rishimu, the trace, the Oisias Rishimu, the letters of the Rishimu. And that is all already gevul. That is limitation. That's real gevul. That's limitation. And we spoke, if you remember, that the power of limitation isn't produced after the tzimtzum. The power of limitation, which is the shorish of the kelim, also traces its way back to pre-tzimtzum. Why? Because if you remember, we brought a teaching, very important teaching to always hold on to, the teaching of the Avodas HaKodesh, which the Avodas HaKodesh says, Rameir ben Gabai, which he says, in a very important teaching, that what? That Or Ein Sof kishem sheyesh lekoyach bebilti bal gvul kach yesh lekoyach begvul. Because if you're going to say Ein lekoyach begvul, he doesn't have the power of gul atamachaser shlemusa. What is he saying? He's saying that the Or Ein Sof must contain within itself, even when it is Ein Sof, the power of gvul, a self-limiting capability as well. Because if you are going to say that he's only limitless, and he can only project in a limitless manner, and he can only affect limitlessly, that means he has to be super big, endlessly big. Well, that itself would be a limitation, because you're saying that he can't be small. So therefore, as an inherent part of his limitlessness is the power to self-limit. And that power, that's called the koyach hagvul that's in the Or Ein Sof. And the koyach hagvul that's in the Or Ein Sof, which at this point, before the tzimtzum, is indifferentiable from the koyach habli gvul. And that's the reason we need the tzimtzum, is to separate the koach hagvul, the power of gvul, and to give it its own, to give it somehow it's to highlight it, to make it come forth, is to enable the koach hagvul to come forth. So that koach hagvul, but before the tzimtzum, it's part of the bli gvul of the Ein Sof. And the first revelation of the koach hagvul, we said, is the oisias harishimu, the letters of the rishimu that are left over after the infinite light has been withdrawn. Remember, so this is an important concept, right? So that koach hagvul that's in the koach habli gvul and part of the koach habli gvul, the power of limitation, that is part of the limitlessness of the Ein Sof before the tzimtzum, that koach hagvul, that's the source of kelim. Now that is, what he's saying over here is that is not to be confused with the Eser Spheros Agnuzais, with the 10 hidden spheros. Because the 10 hidden spheros are in the light, not in the kelim. The source of that's related to the lights. That means even the lights, which will go into the kelim, they too can be traced in the Or Ein Sof. For sure, if the kelim could be traced, then the lights that go into the kelim, which are far more representing the Or Ein Sof, Of course, they're rooted in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. However, the fact that we say there are 10, and we're already beginning to discover, albeit in a very non-defined state, but yet there is 10 spheres, means to say that there is somewhat of a shoresh umakar hagvul, a root and source of gvul, that is related to the limitation of the lights, not the limitation of the vessels. So if to differentiate over here, in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, before the contraction, there are two elements of limitation. One of them is considered the koach hagvul of the Or Ein Sof. This is very important, that we will not be able to proceed any further. This is an important point without differentiating these two. The koach hagvul that's in the Or Ein Sof, that's the root of the kelim, and that everybody agrees on. That about this koach hagvul that's in the Or Ein Sof, at least from the Avodas HaKodesh and onwards, Rameir ben Gabbai, when he introduced this idea. When I say everybody, I mean both the Ramak and the Arizal. Ramosha Kerdover, which everybody says, and everybody's on the same page on this, that the koach hagvul that is in the Or Ein Sof, the beginning of gvul that's in the Or Ein Sof, at least in as much as the kelim are concerned, that's, and remember what we learned, the Ramak says that is the 10 spheres agnuzais. That when it says in Kabbalah and in the old mystical writings that there are 10 hidden spheros in the Or Ein Sof, according to the Ramak, he identifies that as the source of kelim. There's no gvul in the lights. According to the Ramak, there is no limitation in the lights whatsoever. The light is pure light, is Ein Sof. The light only becomes defined, and the light, according to the Ramak, the light actually never becomes defined. Even when the light shines in the kelim, the light remains utterly infinite. The definitions and the effects of the light being limited is because of the kelim, not because of the lights. The lights remain Ein Sof. So according to the Ramosha Kardover, there's only the only gvul, the only power of gvul we can find in the Or Ein Sof is the koach hagvul. That's the root of the kelim, and that koach hagvul, the power of gvul, is one with the koach habli gvul before the tzimtzum. Fine. Comes the Arizal. And that's the idea that's the whole chiddush, that's the whole novelty that we've been learning about in Ayin Beis, is that in Chassidus is following the opinion of the Arizal, that there is already in the Or as well, there is already a tnua, there's already a movement, there's some kind of an element of gvul. That according to the Arizal, the Esa Sfiros Hagnuzos, the 10 hidden Sfiros, are not the kelim, the source of the kelim. That's the koach hagvul shebe Ein Sof that the Ramak and the Arizal agree upon. The Arizal adds that the inyan of 10 hidden spheros is applying even to the Oiros as well. That the Or is also already 10 spheros, 10 Oiros. Okay? However, what needs to be understood is that if we're going to say that there is somewhat of a spheros, different spheres, already 10 different lights in the Or Ein Sof, and we'll say that's already a shoresh or makar hagavul in the lights, not just in the kelim. It's a source and a root for gavul in the kelim. However, it's still, and this is the main point of today's class, is that we still have to inherently understand that we can't compare the two. The koach hagvul that's in the Ein Sof is a koach hagvul, which means its business is gvul, its business is limitation. However, the limited lights, if you might say, the Esa Sfiros Hagnuzos, the shoresh of gvul as it pertains to the lights that's in the Ein Sof, its business is not limitation. Its business is limitlessness. Because as he's going to explain in a moment, since it's light, the main element of light is to reveal the source. And since the source is not limited, the light's business, which means its essence, is also unlimited. Its identity is limitlessness. And since its identity is limitlessness, it has to be pashut. Because anything that is not pashut, once it's chesed, for example, or it is gevura, that's already a tziyur, that's already an image, that's already a design, and a design is already a limitation. And if it's a limitation, it couldn't be a revelation of the source. It wouldn't be or. So the business of the Esses Sfiros Hagnuzos, its feature, what it's about, is not gevul. It's about beli gevul, and therefore it's inherently pashut. Yet somehow we have to figure out why it's 10 and why it has, and how it can incorporate within it already the idea that it is 10 spheros, which means it has some kind of a relationship to the vessels that it will later shine into, already in the light. But it's very important to differentiate that. We'll have to say like this, according to let's crystallize this. The koyach hagvul of the Ein Sof, its business is koyach hagvul. That's what it is. It's the power of gevul, of limitation. However, since it's still embedded in the Ein Sof, it's part of the infinity of God that He can also limit. But what is this power? This power is a power to limit. That's what it is. In other words, it's not, the koach hagvul is not here. The koach hagvul, which is the source of the kelim, is not here to express the maker of the vessels. It's here to make a vessel. Or later down the production line, it's here to make a mountain. It's here to make a tree. It's here to make a monkey. And it's here to make a squirrel. That's his business. Not to introduce God to the squirrel, and not to introduce God to the tree, and not to introduce or reveal that God is the maker of the tree. That's not what it's about. It's about limitation. Obviously, who made the monkey, and who made the mountain, and who made that? But it's the notion, the power, the idea of the koach hagvul is gvul. It's just that when the koach hagvul is still in the Ein Sof, this is a power of a omnipotent being who can self-limit and therefore create all of this. But that's its power. Its power is to make limitation. That's koach hagvul. Then there is another inyan, and there is the idea of oiros, star lights. And lights are revelations and expressions of the luminary. Or is davuk b'ma'or. That's the main theme we're learning today. Light is always connected to its source. It's a reflection of the source, and it's meant to convey and to project the source. However, when light is coming to project the source, he's now going to say, number one, the very notion, we're going to see in a moment, the very notion is that it's revelation, has to mean that it already has some kind of context, some kind of, it's revealing, so the revelation has to have, it's revealing something. So that's the concept of spheros. You can't have, the etzem does not reveal itself without spheros. Spheros is an illumination, and an illumination has to have already somewhat of what it is illuminating. Now, and in that itself, it's illuminating just to illuminate, just to shine, and then its illuminations would be infinite illuminations, or it's to illuminate and to reveal itself to an audience. When it's an illumination to reveal itself to an audience, by merely considering that it needs to reveal the intention of this illumination is with a recipient in mind, that itself conditions the illumination, which is still infinite and inherently undefined, it conditions it to be able to settle into a vessel, which means to illuminate in a specific manner. Although, since it's still a light that hasn't interacted with the vessel yet, it's still within the Or Ein Sof, and it's since it's a reflection of Or Ein of the Atzmos, of the essence, it has to be of the essence, which has no definition whatsoever. But since its intention is to be revealed to somebody, that itself is already predisposing it or dedicating it to a limitation. But that limitation is not an inherent limitation in the light, because or else it wouldn't be light. We'll understand that a little better as we're going to learn. I just wanted to say one thing. So here, again, I got carried away before I was able to move to the important distinction that I wanted to make. The koach hagvul, the power of gvul, that's in the Ein Sof, that's the root of the kelim, that's the root of the vessels. Since it is not light, that's the point of here. The koach hagvul, its emergence is not in a manner of light. Its emergence is in a matter of kelim. Kelim, vessels, we learned to remember we had a whole long 1 or 2 or 3 classes in which we discussed the difference of the evolution of the kelim to the evolution of the light. That the evolution of the kelim comes about through a disconnect from the source. That's the whole point with kelim, is that you want to create something that is unlike the source. So kelim come, remember we learned how kelim come about through a anonymous relationship, and even that we learned how there is a collision. We had discussed a whole bunch of points which bring about that kelim are not meant to be a projection of source, a relationship to source, although obviously it comes from the source. Kelim are created at a distance from its source that's creating it. So it's like we say in Chassidus that a person has 2 abilities. You have the ability of Or and you have the ability of Koach. Or is an illumination of self. Koach is a power that you have. A power, let's say, for example, you can throw something. When you throw something, that power is to produce an energy that leaves the source. If you're throwing something, that force leaves your body. You throw, let's say you throw something and you have a very powerful, you have a lot of power in that. You're a pitcher, a base, so you can throw something really far. So you throw it, then you rest your hand, but the ball that's being thrown is still flying after you put your hand out, which means there is a disconnect. The power left the person. So koach, the idea of koach is to omit an energy, a force that has it in existence without attachment to its source. Therefore, the koach hagvul, when it comes to Or Ein Sof, the koach that God has, koach hagvul, that koach hagvul is not reflecting Or Ein Sof. And for that reason, the koach hagvul produces kelim, and the kelim are not pashut. The kelim are very, very much limitations, and therefore they're unlike God, the God source, who is utterly limitless. Or, however, the whole idea of Or is Or means to reveal yourself. That's the idea of light. Light reveals the Ma'or. Since light is all about revealing itself, therefore the light is always going to possess, even when we're going to speak about a light that is intended to come to a recipient, which means the revelation of self has to be one that could be received by an audience, which means that there has to be somewhat of a definition or somewhat of a limitation on that. But since it's a revelation of the self, in this case the revelation of God, if it would be completely different than God, which means if it would have a tzior, an inherent limitation, then it would never, then it's disconnected from its source. It's not a beam of light which is connected to source. So it has to be the revelation of the Ein Sof to a limited being. So it will always maintain within it the quality of the Or Ein Sof. And what's the quality of the Or Ein Sof? Is that he has no limitations. How can he reveal himself to a limited being? Okay, let's talk about it. We have to figure that out. We would say, it would almost seem to land us back to Ramosha Cordova, to the Ramak, who therefore, because of this point, argues it's true. The lights never, since lights are lights, which are revelations of the source, and source is not limited, so the lights have to be limitless. So there's no limitation inherently in the light, according to Ramosha Cordova. The Arizal makes an incredible impossibility, kind of. He's referring to lights, and he's not arguing on the Ramak. The lights have to be a reflection of the source. Therefore, inherently, the lights have to be pashut. But at the same time, because the lights are intended already, even before the Tzimtzum Hashem is thinking of the worlds, and the construct of the worlds, which are 10, a structure of 10 qualities, which make up all of existence. So therefore, he's designating these lights already to be designated to illuminate to the world. And that designation of the light somehow preconditions the light to be numbered with 10 powers. But the light remains free from those definitions. So how is it then designated? What designates it? So therefore you have to say that these spheros are not real inherent limitations and boundaries, but rather these spheros are still in a state of absolute pshitus. Okay, so let's see. So then it seems like we're just insisting that it's pashut. No, but we're saying they're 10. So let's see if we get that clarity. But this is the point over here. The Inen is bar el Perek design the Essa spheres is the 10 hidden spheres. Ime Yoshem Shoydesham Kara Gavul, even though they are the source and the root of Gavul. Ein Zeb Chinas Koyach HaGavul Shebe Ein Sof. It's not to be mistaken with the Koach HaGavul of the Ein Sof. In other words, this is really a revelation of the Koach HaBeli Gavul of the Ein Sof. The Oiros will be a revelation of Koach HaBeli Gavul, which means the power of limitlessness of the Ein Sof. And the proof that he brings to that is the Essa spheres and Shem Havaya. The 10 spheres, when he says 10 spheres over here, he means the 10 spheres, the lights of the 10 spheres. They are the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei. And the Yud Kei Vav Kei is a name for that reveals not a specific power of God, but that's revealing God himself. Uksev ani Havaya hu Shmi. That Havaya is Hashem's personal name that captures him, not a power of him. Shmi hamiyuchid to be his name that is unified with him. In other words, Shem Havaya is a name of total dveikus, of attachment. Since they are in a state of unity and dveikus and attachment to the source, meaning unlike Kalim and the koach of the Kalim, which the power behind it is a power that is considered a koach that's not davuk b'makar. It's his ability to influence away from himself, not an attachment to himself. That's koach. And that's the secret of the other 7 names of God. They are particular powers of the divine, but not the divine himself, not him himself. But Or is all about dveikus. Then it has to be pashut. That dveikus b'hamakar, since it is davuk in the makar. Davuk means it is attached in the source. Machayev obligates it, forces it. Sheyeh kamoy hamakar, or else it's detached. It's an illumination of the source. So it has to be like the makar. If the makar has no definitions, it doesn't even have definitions. The imkena esesphiris agnuzais comes out that the 10 spheres agnuzai shem b'chinas yichud v'dveikus b'oir ein sof. Since we're talking about oir, and they are in a state of yichud. They are in a state of unification and advekus, in a state of attachment in the Or Ein Sof. They have to be pashut. So now we're beginning to say, okay, so what's the catch? Since the idea of Or, what's the idea of Or? Is Giloi, revelation. Since it's revelation, Hainu, what does that mean? He says in the parentheses, Shaklolis Or. The general idea of light, meaning versus etzem. There is the essence and there is light. Not just the 10 hidden spheres, even the general light that's before the 10 hidden spheres. Since it's Or, since the general idea of light is revelation, albeit that we're still talking about before the tzimtzum, so it's a revelation not to anybody, it's a revelation in himself, right? It's still a revelation in himself. But here is the main point: v'chol giloy, and every revelation behachrach sheyeh by spheres. Every revelation has to have spheres, because a relative is not a revelation; it has to have a sphere. What's a sphere? So I'll try to explain that with my limited understanding in a moment. But I think the next line will help us a lot. And in that revelation, there's two manners in that. There's stage 1 and stage 2. It's all still taking place within him. What are the two stages? Whether the revelation is a revelation, a limitless revelation. Over here, once there is revelation, there has to be spheres. But over here, they are the spheres are without an end. That's possibility number 1. Or the Gilui is considering, like we said earlier, it's a revelation to an audience that it wants to reveal itself to a gvul, in a limited format. Then the Gilui is in a level of 10 spheres. Perek Yud. So let me try to give just one before we have to close the class. Just one nakuda, one point. When we speak about etzem, the essence doesn't have to have any definition whatsoever, other than, not even other than. It is it is the primal being, and even that, the primal being, and even calling it being, and all these primal and all these is already definitions. But what we're saying is that we cannot say that he doesn't exist. Even to say it exists is a definition. But for the sake of not having another term, that's what we call an atzmos. We say atzmos means the essence. The essence of what? The essential being. Fine. Let's relate to it as that. So in the essential being, there's nothing to say. Even to say, for instance, the essential being is omnipotent. Once you're saying he's omnipotent, which in Hebrew means we use the term kol yachol, you're already giving somewhat already of a. You want to know the qualities of this being? He can do anything. He can do anything. Oh, the moment I'm saying he can do anything is a description. That's a sphera. That's already a concept of sphera, because it's already revealing. A revelation has to. What are you saying about it? What is it? If it's being revealed, it has to have a tnua. It has to have somewhat of a something to grab onto for it to be revealed. However, when you're saying, for example, that he's a kol yachol, what you're really saying is, a kol yachol means a omnipotent being. It means the energy that is now emanating from him, his power, his force, is a force of omnipotency, which means it can be anything, do anything, so forth. That's a limitless idea that he's kol yachol, and that contains within itself, essentially, if you're really thinking, what does anything mean? Anything mean? He can be tall, he can be short, he can be bright, he can be dim, he can be kind, he can be strict, he can be I don't know, go through any quality that we only know in the world. And then what we're trying to say is, even beyond all these qualities that we know, there is infinite other qualities that we have that don't even exist in our vocabulary. It doesn't even exist because we're living in the world with certain context, and we don't even know the endless possibilities that are outside the cosmos that God created, the ideas that God created. It's limitless. But when you're saying limitless, you're really saying that it can be Ein Sof, different possibilities. That's the concept of Spheros Ein Kates. In the Kol Yochol, when you're saying, this is why I understand it, when you're saying that he's a omnipotent being by saying Kol Yochol, you're really saying he's included in Kol Chachma and Chesed and Gevura and Malchut and Netzach and every single of the 10 spheros, plus infinite other possibilities. But because Kol Yochol is still, it's an expression of infinity, and it's an expression of infinity. That means each one of these are also, it's not this or it's not that. It's anything, and therefore even though in the anything it includes all these different tziyurim, these tziyurim are not really tziyurim yet. Therefore, we're saying that once you're speaking about a spheros ein kates, which is the concept, let's say, of kol yochol, which is the idea of spheros ein kates, then each one of them is pashut. It's not like in the sphere there is chachma, chesed, and all the infinite possibilities. It's whatever should be required or wanted or desired, anything can be. So that would be stage one of that revelation. That would be kol yachol. Again, in Atzmus, in the essence, you can't even say kol yachol. Because kol yachol, once you're saying kol yachol, you're already giving kol yachol, which means omnipotent. That's already sphera. That's already a quality. Kol yachol is a quality. The fact that he's omnipotent. And God is not limited to any qualities. Sphere is already a quality. It's a maila. It's a quality. A quality is that he's kol yachol. But now let's understand. Now, kol yachol is something that we as limited beings, we can speak of, but we can't fathom that. What do you mean we can't fathom? We can fathom that there is a being who can do anything, but we don't know what anything even means. Because our anything that we know, that we can even imagine, even in our wildest imaginations, will always have a definition of what means anything. Because our anything exists within the construct of the world that we exist in our limited world. So our anything is a very limited anything compared to the real anything. So the fact that Hashem is delivering his light to an actual creation, which means to our reality, that next stage, when he's intending that he doesn't just want to reveal himself, but reveal his power to a world, once he's desiring that it should be to a world, it's already dimming, if you might say, that kol yachol to a narrower level of omnipotence. That narrower level of omnipotence is the concept of 10 spheres. Because every type of quality that we know of in the world is all different mixtures of these 10 spheres. Our context of anything is anything within the world of these 10. Outside of that 10, we don't know. And we can't, it's not even a possibility outside of it's not something that we can conceive. So when God is emanating light, so the general concept of Gilui, the general notion of Gilui, of revelation, already calls for somewhat of a sphera. Every Gilui is through a sphera. There can be spheras ein kates, without an end, and pashut. And then there can be already a certain a desire for this revelation of himself. Again, what is being revealed over here? His omnipotent power, himself, his non-limited ability. But his non-limited ability, if it's going to be revealed to a world, has to shape itself already within a certain design. Now, the light itself, of course, remains the same simple light, like the higher level of the Or Ein Sof, and it remains and rooted and sourced in Atzmos, and therefore still maintaining the pshitus, still maintaining the simplicity of the source. But because it has already a target, it has a kavanah, it has an intention, it is intended to be an illumination to the world, that is considered a preconditioning of the light, and therefore bending the light, if you might say, it's not really bending the light, but it is preparing the light to be bent to go into Kalim. And that is already considered Esesphiris Agnuzos. Okay, we have to chew on this much more. Be'ezus Hashem, in next class, even this one we went 10 minutes over. But I hope by sitting and everybody chewing on this idea, it's a good thing to chew on throughout the next 24 hours until we get to the next class. Be'ezus Hashem, you won't let Mashiach be here today.